So let's continue in our notes from yesterday. So we started with half angle identities, and we started off with the sine and cosine half angles. So we're going to continue with that, and today we're going to do tangent. Now notice that tangent gives us 3 options, okay? And we get the same answer no matter which one we use. So tangent half angle gives us 3 separate options to work with. And I think for the case, for this one, I tend to have a preference of using this third one. However, I have at times used both. I've used the first 2 also. So the first thing we want to figure out is what quadrant would I be in if I have 7/8. So thinking about counting by 8s, so this would be 0/8, 4/8, 8/8, 12/8. 7/8 would be in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, tangent is negative. So tangent would be negative in quadrant 2. So I'm going to write that down. Tangent is negative in quadrant 2. So if I were using this option, that would be relevant. However, in these 2 half angles, it doesn't matter. Okay, because the positive or negative option is going to take care of itself within the question. So let's figure out what angle I'm dividing by 2 to get to 7/8. So if I take 7/8 plus 7/8, I would get 14/8, which reduces to, if I divide both by 2, 7 pi/4. So that is my half angle that I'm using, 7 pi/4. So I'm going to use my half angle identity. So I have the tangent of 7 pi/4 divided by 2, because I'm using the half angle identity. And I'm using, again, I'm going to use this one here, this option here. So it would be 1 minus the cosine of 7 pi/4 so I'm using that identity off your paper. 1 minus the cosine of 7 pi/4 divided by the sine of 7 pi/4. So pick up your unit circle and let's figure out what these numbers are. So the cosine of 7 pi/4 is positive root 2/2. So that would be 1 minus positive root 2/2 divided by negative root 2/2. So let's go ahead and simplify this. First thing I know is I need a common denominator. So I'm essentially writing this as 2/2. Which is going to give me 2 minus root 2 all over 2. And that's divided by my denominator. So let's do our keep, change, flip. So keep the numerator. Change to multiplication. And flip. And that's a negative. So of course my 2's are going to cancel, which is going to leave me a negative 1 multiplied by my numerator. And that's all over the square root of 2. When I distribute that negative, I'm left with a negative 2 plus root 2 all over root 2. Get myself a little bit more space. Okay. There we go. And lastly, we have to rationalize. So I'm going to rewrite this so I have my square root in the front. So my numerator is a -2 plus root 2. And then my denominator is just a root 2. Okay. I just kind of like when I'm distributing to put that term that I'm trying to distribute in the front. So let's go ahead and distribute that. And we will get -2 root 2 plus the square root of 4, which is going to simplify down to 2, all over a 2. If you made it here, I would be very, very, very proud of you because you did phenomenal. However, we can simplify all of these 2's. Not the 2 under the square root, though. If I divide those 2's by 2, my simplified answer and the best answer would be -1 root 2 plus 1 over 1, which can also be just written as -root 2 plus 1. And that is our tangent half angle. So the next example, and again, you can always pause to copy down the question, is if tangent of x equals 5 over 13, and we know that we're in between pi over 2 and pi, which again is quadrant 2, because this is quadrant 2, we need to find the cosine half angle. So the problem is I need to find cosine half angle, and in order to find cosine half angle, I need to know cosine. If we look at the identity, I need to know cosine. And they didn't tell me cosine, they told me sine. So we need to do our Pythagorean theorem, knowing that sine is y over r. We would have to find x. So if you do r squared equals x squared plus y squared, and this is a Pythagorean triple, so I'm going to go pretty fast through this. You may recognize that x has to be 12, but when you do the math, you do end up with 12. X is 12. So that means that the cosine of x is 12 over 13. Now, we're in quadrant 2, though, and in quadrant 2, yes, sine is positive in quadrant 2, but in quadrant 2, cosine is negative, so we need to put a negative there. And now we're ready to just follow the identity. Now, I don't know where theta is per se, so I know that we're in quadrant, I know that we're in quadrant 2. The angle is in quadrant 2. So we're just going to follow along and use our identity. So we know that the cosine of x over 2, my half angle, is going to equal, and then I have 1, and put my numerator. My numerator says 1 plus, and it's the cosine of x, which would be -12 over 13. And that's all over 2. Now, I know that this is positive because if x is in quadrant 2, every angle that I divide by 2 in quadrant 2 is going to put me back in quadrant 1. So I know that my plus or minus, this is actually going to be a positive. So now we're ready to simplify the numerator. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to start with this one here. Let's figure out what is 1 plus negative 12 over 13. And of course, I'm going to write that as with a common denominator. So I would have 13 over 13 minus 12 over 13. This is my numerator. And I'm dividing this by 2 over 1. And this is all under a square root. So what I did here was, this is my numerator. This is my numerator. And I'm dividing it by, because that's what a fraction is. A fraction is division by 2. So 2 over 1. So what that's going to give me is 1 over 13. Keep, change, flip. So 1 over 13 divided by 2 is the same as 1 over 13 times 1/2, which is going to give me 1 over 26, which would be a beautiful thing if 26 was a perfect square, but it's not. So we need to split our fraction up and rationalize it. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 26. And my final answer would be the square root of 26 all over 26. Okay. So our third and final example says, if cosine of x is 2/3 and x is in quadrant 1, so we're making it easy for us, let's find the half angle. And this one is really easy for us because in order to find a sine half angle, we need to know cosine. And they gave us cosine, so we do not need to do the Pythagorean theorem. We're just going to go straight to it. So I know it's positive, so I'm going to use the plus, not the minus. So my sine of x over 2 is going to equal a positive, and it would be 1 minus 2/3 divided by 2. I encourage you to pause the video, try to simplify it, and then compare your answer to what I get at the end. So I'm going to simplify my numerator, which would simplify 2. So 1 is going to be rewritten as 3 over 3 minus 2 over 3. And that's divided by 2 over 1. This is my square root. And then that breaks down to be 1/3 times 1/2, which is the square root of 1 over 6. So that 6 is a problem, but we know how to take care of it. And we end up with root 6 over 6 as our final answer.